video, I want to talk about how to recognize carbohydrate stress in a honeybee colonies. What does that mean? It means how to recognize when you need to feed your bees, right? So bees will leave their nest, they will collect nectar from flowers, they will convert that nectar to honey, and that honey, and even that nectar sometimes, will provide the sugar source that the bees need. That sugar, that carbohydrate source, is the energy that fuels the honeybee colony. Bees collect nectar because it has sugar. They convert it to honey because they condense that amount of energy into less space. Converting it to honey also increases the shelf life of that sugar, and they store it in the comb so they can have a constant supply of energy. So how can you recognize when bees don't have enough access to carbohydrates? Well, I'm going to give you a few clues here. Number one, you don't see a lot of foraging activity at the nest entrance. Or when you look closely at the bees that are flying, they're only carrying pollen as an example. So you can get very good pollen flows that are accompanied simultaneously by bad nectar flows. Or you can get no flow at all, where you're getting neither pollen nor nectar. So the first sign that you might be in a nectar dearth is when you just don't see bee flight activity at the nest entrance. That's not necessarily something to concern yourselves about, because remember, bees store the honey. They store that sugar in the combs. So if you see reduced activity, or it's a time of year when you know there's not a lot of nectar available in the environment, the next thing to do is to go to your hive to determine if they have enough stored resources. All of that's determined by weight. And I recognize that you're watching this video from anywhere around the world and that we all use different box sizes and hive styles, etc. But the best way that I can explain it is at any given time, a honeybee colony needs about a medium super's worth of honey available in the nest. It doesn't matter if you don't use medium supers, if you use double deeps or single deeps or triple deeps or shallows or whatever. If you just think about the size of a medium super and the amount of honey that would be in it if it were full, just put that in your mind into the hive style, the hive configuration that you manage. Bees need about that much honey. And that is especially true if there's a forthcoming dearth that lasts quite a while. When might that occur? Well, that might occur, for example, after the spring nectar flow. You tend to hit a summer dearth in many places around the world. If there's no nectar coming in summer, say from June all the way to September, then you've got a handful of months that those bees have to have enough stored sugar in order to survive that period. When is the other big nectar dearth in the environment? Well, of course, that's winter. That's really why bees store honey in the first place, is so they have energy when there's no flowers available in the nest. So in anticipation of those major nectar dearths, you've got to have at least a medium super's worth of honey as an insurance for bees to have enough food to consume as they're moving through that sizable nectar dearth, either the summer nectar dearth or the really big one that can occur in winter, especially if you live in cold climates where those winters are very long. So, do they have a medium super's worth of honey? What does that mean? Well, I can judge that a few ways. I can go behind a hive, reach to that handle that it's in the bottommost box, and rock that hive forward. Just pick it up with one hand, trying to rock it forward. And I can judge, of course, very subjectively, I can judge the weight of that hive, which is a good indication of the amount of stores that that hive has. So how can you make that subjective method a little bit more objective? Well, go into your hive and see with your eyes if they have about a medium super's worth of honey stored through the boxes. If they do, if you think there's a critical mass of honey in that hive, reassemble the boxes and do the hoist test again. And you have just trained your mind to associate the amount of honey that you saw with the weight of that box that you're rocking forward. If you go into that hive and you see considerably less honey, put it back together, rock it forward, and that will teach you what too light is. So you'll learn how, when heavy enough is reached, and you'll learn it's too light. Again, it's very subjective. It's going to take a lot of experience, but you'll get there. The second best way to judge carbohydrate resources in the nest is physically go into it. Go into it. Take out frames. Are you seeing honey? When you take off the topmost box and set it aside, does it have an appreciable weight? If you're using just a single deep brood box, when you go into it, does it have sizable bands of honey around the brood nest that would be at least a third of the total volume of that box? So visualizing stored honey or stored nectar in the nest is a really great way to get a handle. So that subjective way of kind of lifting, visualizing inside the nest, knowing that you're in a nectar dearth, all of these things help you make the right decision related to what should I do to address this problem. Well, what would happen if you don't address the problem? What are the signs of carbohydrate deficiencies? Well, the hive itself would be very light. When you go into the nest, you wouldn't see stored honey. But from a bee perspective, bees that are running out of carbohydrate are really bees that are running out of energy. Think about your car sputtering as it goes down the highway. Bees, as they are starving to death from a lack of carbohydrates, get very lethargic. They move very slowly. They might put their heads into cells and die with their rear end facing out of the cell. And you'll see entire patches of bees having done this. So all of this indicates to you that the bees are running out of energy. And if there's no stored resources in the nest and the bees are starting to be very lethargic as they move around, then you know the end is near and you've got to take drastic steps to put resources into that hive. I have another video all about types of feeders that you can use in your hive, and yet again, a second video all about how to feed using those types of feeders. You can watch both of those videos all about getting those carbohydrate resources in the nest. It's just very important that you be able to learn to spot those carbohydrate deficiencies because it's up to you to solve this. And I really want to make one kind of final point here. A lot of people take the approach that I am not going to feed my bees. If it's not available in the environment, the bees don't need that. Well, we are managing them in areas that bees may choose not to be on their own. We're forcing them to be where we place them. So it is our ethical responsibility. If we spot symptoms of starvation, carbohydrate deficiencies, we have that obligation to go in and remedy that situation by providing sugar or honey resources for those bees. Starvation, lack of carbohydrate resources, is one of the greatest stressors your colonies will face. So you've got to spot those deficiencies and be confident taking the step to remedy them. Commercial beekeepers around the world talk nonstop about feeding bees. They spend a lot of management time feeding bees. Last bit of advice, you can reach a point of saturation. Once you've fed your bees to the point they've got that medium super's worth of honey, you don't need to keep feeding. It's okay to stop. A lot of new beekeepers will be told to feed their bees and they'll just feed. My strategy is to only feed when necessary and to stop when it's no longer necessary. If I see a hive that doesn't have that medium super's worth of honey, I feed until I get it there. Once I get it there, I stop. Follow those basic tricks and you'll really ensure that your colonies are productive and healthy and don't suffer from carbohydrate stress.